Thank you, Des. Good morning, everybody. It's good to see you, my friends. Welcome, and welcome to you out there in virtual land. I love that line, yes to your yes, because the Spirit knows best. So we are moving into a real time of regeneration. And I just love the festivals and the holidays that begin to roll out this time of year. Friday night began the season of Ramadan. And in another week and a half begins Passover. And then, of course, the Passion Mysteries. And what I love about all these stories, whether it's the story of the Prophet Muhammad, or whether it's the story of Moses, or whether it's the story of Jesus and those that follow them, you know, all the children of Abraham, they all say yes to yes. And I think we know that authentic yes when we're a little bit terrified, right? Because we're saying yes to step into the unknown. And, you know, the one who sort of begins the whole thing is Father Abraham, right? And his yes was an acknowledgement of a promise that was made to him, and that all of us, whatever lineage, whatever tradition we may follow, all receive the same promise to that yes, which is, you will be guided, you will be changed, and you will be a blessing. We all will be guided one way or the other to that next indicated step. We will be changed because in order to enter into the promise, we must become different from where we were. You know, there's that great story in Exodus. I think it's in the 3rd chapter for those keeping score. Moses is finding this burning bush. And the miracle of that story, that legend, isn't that the bush was burning and not being consumed. The real miracle was that Moses was finally paying attention. Because, you know, as the poet William Blake says, when the doors of perception are cleared, we shall see all things as they are, divine. You know, and this goes all the way back to the story of Jacob, right, where he has that dream of the ladder and of angels descending and ascending, and there's this magical things, and he sees the divine there, and he wakes up in the morning and he says, surely God was in this place, and I did not see him. Which begs the question, where else is God that we don't see? So it's all about perception, is it not? You know, how we see, our willingness to look, to say yes, to drop a perception. I think last month, whenever it was, I was here, I was talking about Ted Lasso. I love the Ted Lasso show. You know, it's not my religion, but it certainly is my enjoyment. And in that, there's this wonderful scene, right, where he quotes Walt Whitman. It's a beautiful scene. He's in a pub, and in the pub, did I tell this story before? I never know what I say. So he's in this pub, and there's a guy in the show who his role is to be sort of a jerk. We'll use that word here today. And so he decides that he's going to try to humiliate Ted Lasso by challenging him to a dart game. They're in a British pub, you know, and there's that whole thing. And so he challenges Ted Lasso to a dart game. And he scores very well. And then it's Ted Lasso's turn. And Ted Lasso goes, you know, I was reading Walt Whitman. I love this. This guy's quoting Walt Whitman on television. He says, you know, I was quoting Walt Whitman. And he has this statement, be curious, not judgmental. Because a curious person would ask, have you ever played darts? Well, as a matter of fact, I have. I used to play every Sunday with my dad. In fact, I was in a championship, boom, 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 and totally mortifies the guy, right? So, this thing about being curious, not judgmental. Because when we're curious, we're teachable, we're open. We're able to place ourselves in a place of amazement and wonder and awe. When we're judgmental, we're not teachable. We're clinging, we're grasping, we're holding in. Where being curious is being open. Being judgmental is being closed, right? And so I think it's a great way to look at life. It's a great way, to me, it's kind of like a mantra of my life, to be curious, not judgmental, because it's so easy to do that. Paul Tillich, the great public theologian of the 50s, says this. He says, the opposite of faith is not doubt. The opposite of faith, I'm sorry, I forgot to turn my phone off. The opposite of faith is not doubt. The opposite of faith is certainty. Because certainty is a defense against doubt, right? And so, and what he also goes on to say is that our faith should have room for a little bit of doubt in it. Because if there's doubt, there's curiosity. If there's curiosity, there's learning. If there's learning, there's insight. We don't have to worry about offending God or, step on a crack, break your mother's back kind of thing. We can explore. We can be open. And so, that's kind of one of the things that I love about the television show Ted Lasso. And I'm not going to do a whole talk on Ted Lasso. Like I said, I would do it on Tolkien, but not Ted Lasso. But, we're sort of rewatching it. We limit our television time to maybe 1 or 2 shows a week. So we're watching that, and we're also watching The Last Kingdom, which is like the opposite of Ted Lasso. And I'll talk about that in just a moment. But there was this other thing about this that, there's another character there that's texting another character, and there's a budding romance that's happening. And one of the characters quotes Rainer Maria Rilke. This is why I love the show. It's just like so intelligent, Rainer Maria Rilke on television, on a comedy show. And the line is just beautiful because what he says is this. He says, our deepest fears are like dragons guarding our deepest treasures. Breathe that one in. Our deepest fears are like dragons guarding our deepest treasures. And if we're, somebody really wants to talk to me. So if we're, you can't fix it. No, I don't. It was just, if you guys don't mind a little beep here and there, I should have turned it off. In fact, I thought about turning it off. I said, who's going to text me on a Sunday morning? They know I'm a minister. Oh, hopefully my church is not on fire. No, it'd be ringing if that would be the case. So, that sense of going on the journey into the unknown, there's that little bit of fear, right? That little bit of apprehension. What would be the point of faith without that? So I love that line, our deepest fears are like dragons guarding our deepest treasures. So immediately I started looking for this because I really like Rainer Maria Rilke. So I started looking and I couldn't find it anywhere. So I don't know if Rilke really says it. Kind of like you're not sure if Joseph Campbell says that, but it's good. But it led me to this quote that is from Rainer Maria Rilke. And it's from the 8th chapter of Letters to a Young Poet, which is a beautiful book. And it's not so much a book about poetry as it is a book about living. Because you really can't do poetry unless you're living authentically. So that's what it is. And so what he writes is this. He says, how could we forget the myths about dragons who at the last moment transform into princesses? Perhaps all the dragons of our lives are like princesses waiting to see us act just once with courage. Perhaps every terror is at its core some helpless thing that wants help. Perhaps every terror at its core is some helpless thing that wants help. Now that line is worth pondering because it is exactly opposite of the world in which we live. Because what do we want to do when we're afraid? What do we want to do when there's anxiety? What do we want to do when there's trauma? We want to control it. We want to respond with power instead of curiosity. We want to be in this place of certitude because that's how you deal with it, right? So, this great theologian, he's brilliant on Hebrew Bible. His name is Walter Brueggemann. And he says this. He says, a society that lives in deep anxiety craves certitude. We seek to find such certitude by way of theological orthodoxy, or by scientific data, or by technological control, or by economic tyranny, or by alternative ideologies. Of course, that doesn't apply to anybody in this room or any country that we're aware of, right? This sense of certitude, right? And we try to, trust the science, trust this, trust that. And then he goes on to say this. He says, where did I have it there? Did I drop it? I guess I lost that quote. But the point is this. That's interesting. The point of it is this, is that when we live in certitude, there's no room for amazement or surprise or wonder. There's no room for freedom. If we live in a sense of certitude, of trying to control, we live in a world without love. Because the very essence of love is this: freedom. If there is no freedom, there is no love. And so to seek this is to seek to live closed, judged. Certainly, we have certitude, but at what cost? It's the exact opposite. In a sense, we've been somewhat colonized in our way of looking at things and responding to things, whether it be individually or collectively, to kind of hold back. What Brueggemann goes on to say is, he says, thankfully, we live in a world where there is no control. It's really kind of a word that we make up so we can sleep at night. But we, instead of trying to control, we try to remain agile. Instead of falling back on power, we respond with curiosity. Tell me more. Tell me more. Tell me more. There's a change of myths, because we're sort of conditioned to the myth of redemptive violence. Redemptive violence is this: if I create enough pain, it will be for the good. Whether that mean, bombing for peace, or, placing ourselves in unrealistic and unhealthy forms of lifestyle so that we can achieve certain kinds of goals, as opposed to trusting and curiosity and openness and allowing ourselves to be led. The last kingdom is exactly that myth, right? Because there's this great line in there where he talks about, one of the characters talks about, he says, a person cannot be a king without violence. Well, that's a lie. That's just a bold-faced lie. Because there's a different way of being. So how do we respond to anxiety, trauma, to saying yes to that yes that fills us with a little bit of trembling? We do what we've always done. We create. Maxine Hong Kingson says this: in times of destruction, create something. A poem, a parade, a community, a school, a vow, a moral principle, one peaceful moment. How would our world be different if our response to the things we fear was with creativity as opposed to power and control? How would our lives individually be different? You know, I say this like Henny Youngman taught. You know, Henny Youngman used to say that every time he ate a corned beef sandwich, that it was the best one he ever had. So whenever I quote a book, I'm always saying it's the best book I ever read. But there is a book that it's in the top 5, I'll say that. It's called Freeing the Soul from Fear by Robert Sardillo. And in it, he talks about when we feel trauma, when we feel fear, anxiety, whatever the case may be, what happens is our imagination flatlines. And so the real curative work, the real superpower that we want to regenerate is our imagination. Because our imagination allows us to arrange our perception in such a way that it sees new possibilities, right? Because as students of mental science, what we know is the trajectory is this: how we perceive dictates how we think. How we think dictates how we speak. How we speak creates the world experience that we're having. Emma Curtis Hopkins used to say that the world in which we live is an exact record of our thoughts. We speak our thoughts, but our thoughts come from our perception. And our perception is dictated by our imagination. And we may think that we have no control over that, but that's another form of colonization. It's another form, it's another ruse. Because the reality is we do have absolute control. It takes training, no doubt about that. It takes a little bit of work. It takes saying yes to yes and stepping into the unknown, but it's exactly what we teach and it's exactly what we do. So there's this other Ted Lasso. Will this be the last one today? I don't know, but I think it is. So anyway, there's this one that's the Christmas Ted Lasso show in the second or first season. I don't know whichever season it is. And they're going around to this. For those who have not, does anybody watch Ted Lasso? 1, 2, 3, 4. You guys, it's like brilliant. And if you're saying to yourself, well, I don't want to get Apple TV because it costs what, $3.99 or $4.99 a month. So next time you go to the coffee shop and order a Frappo Mocha soy light latte with whatever, you've bought Apple for the month. You know, it's worth it. It really is. So in this one, there's the Ted Lasso show is about a soccer team in England, and this American Ted Lasso is their coach. And so it's the Christmas, and they're all talking about what they do for Christmas. And there's a guy from Mexico, and it's about his family and all that. And there's another guy from Holland, and he's talking about the things that he does there. And there's the British people, and they're talking about what they're doing. And there's a guy from Nigeria, and he says, well, what does Christmas remind you of? And he said, colonization. Breathe that one in. Colonization. Colin Wilson, in his book, The Mind Pirates, talks about this, how our minds can be colonized by external ideas and that we have to work on them. And you know, unfortunately, what has happened is the great stories of this first century Palestinian rabbi who taught about love and about friendship have been colonized for violence and monarchy and misogyny and all these other kinds of things, and I try to be a devotee or follower or at least fan of Jesus. I grew up Roman Catholic, and it was a great experience for me, all things said and done. And it just got to the point where we just sort of agreed to see other people. And it wasn't so much Jesus. It wasn't so much Jesus, but the friends he kept, But, for myself, I refuse to let that define my relationship to any teacher, guru, or avatar that is an expression of the divine. And then what else can become possible there? Because the whole message of Jesus is that of love. As practitioners, we know, I teach this in my practitioner students. One of the first questions is, can you pray for someone without loving them? Spoiler alert, the answer is no. What Dr. Holmes says is we take the condition on the outside and we heal it on the inside. Prayer, the contemplation of the facts of life from the highest point of view, says Emerson, is impossible without love. And the real work of practitioners, the real work of spiritual community is to love each other into wholeness. Or as my teacher used to say, grow up all over each other. But in either case, it's to love each other into wholeness. James Baldwin says this. He says, love takes off the masks we wear. No, love takes off the masks we fear we cannot live without and know we cannot live within. So, if we were to take that power, the power of love, the power of the Logos, and separate it from Christendom itself, what we have is this creatively powerful opportunity to transform the world into a place that works for all living beings. A new imagination is possible with the possibility of love. And I think the most important thing to remember about this story, or the story of the Passover, or the story of Ramadan, or the stories of Krishna, or any of these great spiritual teachers, that the unifying story is this, is that we are part of something greater than ourself. And when we can identify ourself with that which calls us to a greater experience of ourself beyond our pettiness and our fear and whatever else it is, then we truly find ourselves. Jesus says that, right? He who loses himself shall find himself, and he who seeks to find himself shall lose himself. So Thomas Merton says it like this. He says, we must not live for ourselves, but for others. When we do this, we will be able, first of all, to face and accept our own limitations. As long as we secretly adore ourselves, our own deficiencies will remain to torture us with apparent defilement. And the quality there, I think, is this. When we talk about great spiritual teachers, they reflect to us an image of the divine. The thing about Jesus is he was so in touch with the divine that being in his presence was as if being in the presence of the divine, right? And so when we get that, and in the Gospel of St. John, which is really a handbook of a mystery school, Jesus, I think, not this Sunday at least, I think when we read the Gospels, we see four sides of Jesus. Therein we see four sides of the divine: friend, teacher, Savior, Lord. I only want to talk about one today, and that is friend. And friend is what? A friend is someone who listens, that we can talk about anything. A friend is someone we can depend on. And a friend is someone we enjoy. So, my question then is this. Is your relationship to the divine one of openness, where there is authenticity, where we can say anything we want to say? Is your relationship to the divine one that you can depend on no matter what? And is your relationship to the divine one that you can enjoy? And because, as Dr. Holmes says, each of us is a center of divine consciousness within the vast whole. In other words, each of us has within us that living spirit of the Logos, which is the truest thing about us. I think there are two things that we should remember are absolutely the truest thing about who we are. The first is we are a center of divine consciousness within the vast whole. And the second is this, that we are the beloved of God. And so if we are that, and we cultivate a friendship to ourself, can we be open and authentic with ourself? Can we depend on ourself? And do we enjoy ourself? And when we begin to do that, then we are able to form authentic friendships and communities. And that is how we begin to create newness, to be guided, to be changed, and to be blessings. The poet laureate of our great nation, Amanda Gorman, says this: while we might feel small, separate, and alone, our people have never been more tightly tethered. The question's not if we will weather this unknown, but how we will weather the unknown together. Thank you for your kind attention.